Comrades, I'd like to welcome you to this week's meeting of the Workers' International Network. Uh, we have comrades here from France, Britain, Italy, Argentina, Denmark, and Namibia and India. So even though not very many comrades this time, I think people are on demonstrations for very understandable reasons. But of course, the meeting will be recorded, and I'm sure comrades will catch up and watch the video. Um, right, today is a very unusual meeting, perhaps, for when we usually were discussing current or past workers' struggles, and perhaps we don't do enough of the sort of theoretical issues. But today we're really privileged to have Comrade Raymond Debord from Paris, who is a sociologist and also a long-standing revolutionary. And the topic is the underpopulation problem. I always thought it's very ironic that apologists for capitalism are always talking about overpopulation, ever since, of course, the days of Malthus, nearly 200 years ago. For instance, they always blame the poverty of India up until the recent period on one of the very factors that fueled the economic miracle, so called, in the USA and in China, etc., at the very time that Indian capitalism was hardly hobbling along, and that was the very question of the rapidly growing population. China had until recently very much the biggest population in the world, and yet we've seen over the last 40 years the incredible record, historically unprecedented growth of the economy and modernization of society. We had in the USA in the period of the over 100 years ago. But at that time, with the constant influx of immigration from Europe and from the rest of the world, they weren't suffering from overpopulation. On the contrary, that fed the uh, the the um, uh, the labour power for industry, and there was enormous growth to be the most powerful country in the world. It was actually the availability of surplus manpower which had allowed an influx of fresh reserves of labour into industry in those countries. So, as I say, America's wealth was founded upon successive waves of immigration, which provided a rare combination of both cheap labour and a booming market. And conversely, you could say the declining populations of, say, Ireland in the 19th century, or of a country like Nepal today, led by mass emigration, you could hardly say that their shrinking populations have been beneficial to their economies. Only a socialist society would be capable of harnessing the full potential energies and creative talent of humanity. Now, Comrade Raymond has studied this question and has written several books on the question. So it's over to Raymond to finally prick the bubble of the fallacy of overpopulation and to explain, on the contrary, the problems of the falling birth rate and the aging of the populations, in which is actually could be one of the many factors leading to or building up to a catastrophe in the future. So, Comrade Raymond, over to you.
Thank you very much, Roger, and thank you for this invitation. Effectively, I think it's a huge problem, a worldwide problem, what some people call the demographic winter. And the problem is that this issue that the socialist left in general don't take account of this issue. Now we have only 2 Marxist books on these topics, which is not not a lot. I will try to share something. Okay, the first one is demography and migration in the change of period, written by Pierre-Maria Davoli, which is a collection of articles published in the Italian newspaper Lotta Comunista, and also translated in French. And the second one is mine, only in French at this time, at this stage. For comrades who read French, I will share the link in the chat. Wait a minute. Up. If I can paste, I can. So I will try later. Oh, it's okay.
Yes.
So the first question the comrades may hike, it's why have we this problem of only 2 books in Italian and French on the issue? And the answer is because the left, to my opinion, is deeply under influence of liberalism, and especially what we call the neo-Malthusianism. So what the state of world demographics? The current period, it's one of the what we can describe as a huge optical illusion, because if you look at the world demography, the first thing to appear is an extraordinary population explosion. I will try to show you this. As you can see, the population growth curve has almost a vertical aspect. There was 1 billion inhabitants on Earth in 1800, 2 billions in 1928, 3 billions in 1960, 4 billions in 1974, 5 billions in 1987, 6 in 1999, 7 in 2011, 8 in 2023. So it's almost designed. And it's from here that a number of people have started talking about overpopulation again. In other words, the idea that there were too many humans that could be fed. I said again, because it's a very old idea. First formulated by the British economist Thomas Malthus in 1778. And it's a false idea, belied by the facts since the beginning, because the agricultural productivity has grown much faster than the population. A false idea exposed in their time by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, who wrote hundreds of pages of polemics against Malthus on these issues. And these misconceptions recur regularly in times of political uncertainty, as illustrated by this quote from a founder of the German social democracy at the end of the 19th century. It's a false idea, but that hasn't stopped actual public figures from predicting a planet with 11, 15, or even 32 billion inhabitants by the end of the century. But this will never happen. And not only for a question of agricultural productivity. It won't happen for one simple reason, the world population growth has already begun to slow down. The growth was 2% per year in the 1960s. Now it's just 1% per year. The United Nations Population Department predicts a world population peak in 2084 with 10.3 billion inhabitants, and then the start of the decline. And these are not just predictions, because in some countries or regions, the population has already begun to decline. China and the whole of Southeast Asia, I mean Japan, South Korea, etc. Russia, the Balkans. Today, 63 countries in the world have already reached their population peak. And 48 others will reach it in 2050, including Brazil, Iran, or Turkey. And finally, the 128 remaining countries will reach their population peak by 2100. So how can we explain the slowdown in world population growth, or even the population decline in some countries? This phenomenon is linked to, in one hand, to the rise of the life expectancy. So I show you a slide on this issue. It's the world life expectancy. More than 70 years now. It was 30 years in the times of Malthus. And in the second hand, this phenomenon is linked to a worldwide drop, as you said in the introduction, Roger, a worldwide drop in the birth rate. On average, women had 5.3 children in 1963, 3.6 in 1983, 2.6 in 2003, 2.25 in 2023. This means that very soon the global birth rate will fall below the generation renewal threshold, estimated at 2.1 children per woman. This slide shows some countries, and as you can see, this phenomenon applies to all countries and all continents. I was recently in Morocco for a conference. Morocco, it's an immigration country, mainly toward France and Belgium. And now in Morocco, the fertility rate is has fallen to 1.97 children per woman. That it's below the generation renewal threshold. If things continue in the same pace, the period during which humanity will have counted over 2 billion inhabitants will have been a short parenthesis of 400 years. So, what are we dealing with? In reality, the phenomenon has been well known for almost a century. In the 1920s, the American scientist Warren Simpson Thompson compared the birth rate of different countries and realized that there was a relationship between birth rates and the level of industrial development. He found that the most industrial countries had the lowest birth rates. And in 1934, a Frenchman, Adolphe Landry, published the first general theory of the subject in his book, The Demographic Revolution. Landry did not give a name to the new demographic regime he was discovering. since it is generally referred as the demographic transition. So let's take a look at this phenomenon. As you can see, what is presented as the first stage on the left correspond in fact to the population regime that preceded the Industrial Revolution. It is marked by a high mortality rate, a high birth rate, and a low population growth. In the second stage, the demographic revolution begins. One, you can see a decrease of death rate, mainly decrease of child mortality and mother's mortality. Second, the population begins to grow. In the third stage, the decrease of the fertility rate begins because there is a kind of adaptation. If it's a bit caricatural, but if the children don't die, the people have less children. The population continue to grow. Why? Because from generation in generation of women with more people, even they have less children, the global population continue to grow to a certain point. And the first stage, it's the stage in the one we are currently or will reach in the coming years. Depends of the countries. The birth and death rates are low, and the population peak is reached in some countries. The description of stage 5 in the slide is rather optimistic in this document, because as I said earlier, in a lot of countries, the population is already in decline, and this decline is said to become more widespread. So personally, I don't believe in the term demographic transition, because the phenomenon we are looking at, it's not a temporary one. It's the regime of population for an entire historical period. And this period corresponds to that of the preponderance of the capitalist production mode. And it is why I prefer to speak of capitalism population law, which is that of population growth followed by a collapse. You can see these in these two maps. The first one is 1940 on the left, 1945, the second 2023. And you see that where industrial capitalism expands and dominates, the birth rate is declining. Where it is only superficially anchored, for example, in sub-Saharan Africa or Central Asia, the birth rate remains high. The reason is that rural economy with little mechanization or the weight of the informal economy in the big cities justify the maintenance of extensive solidarity networks and so large families. I will also briefly mention another major problem linked in another way to the profit-driven system. I mean the fertility problems. These are reaching worrying levels with a 50% drop in the number of sperm per millimeter in 25 years and a weakening of our ability to conceive. This phenomenon is mainly due to pollution caused by the presence of endocrine disruptors in cosmetics and in food. So now let's see what the problem is. After all, we could imagine living very well if we were less numerous, like let's say in the 50s or in the 60s. The problem, it's not a problem of number. The problem is the average age of the populations. In other words, the aging of the population.
Exactly.
So I show you this slide. This slide shows the evolution of age pyramid since 1950. A graph which look less and less like a pyramid. In 1970, the median age of the world population was 20. Today is 30, and in France, for example, it's already 42. One of its effects is that the working population, I mean the people of working age, will decline, is declining, and or will decline soon. For example, in France, it is estimated that the working population will decline from 2037. And they will pose, and is already posing, huge problems. A declining number of contributors will have to finance increasing expenditures. I mean, health insurance, old age dependency, retirement pensions. You know, in France, it was a huge struggle on this issue 2 years ago. And the public debt is expected to rise by 35% in Great Britain, for example, and in 25% in the Eurozone by 2050. So the Standards and Poor's Global Ratings Agency consider that half of the world economies will be, I quote, high risk by 2050. So faced with this situation, capitalist and international organizations have come up with 4 options, sometimes combined. First, develop family policies. Second one, immigration. Third, expand the working population. Fourth, increase the labor productivities. Some international organizations, such as the OECD, support the 4 options, but this organization is the only one to advocate support from families. They advocate in general for childcare leave, development of group childcare facilities, financial aid to the families, and help with access to the housing, which is one of the main problems on this issue. And in countries with very low birth rates, like Japan or China, some large private companies are also taking initiatives. For example, you have the Japanese Hitoshi Corporation and the Chinese Ctrip.com, the first one in the finance and the second one in the travels. And these 2 companies have proposed flexible working hours and a work organization that make it easier to combine work and family life. The solution of immigration is promoted sometimes, for example, by the International Monetary Fund, which calls for, I quote, easing restrictions on immigrations, particularly from Africa. But the use of immigration poses some problems. The first one is matching people's level of training to company needs. The second one, it's the capacity of host societies to integrate the newcomers. The third, it's the fact that it's not a long-term solution, as the birth rate is declining everywhere. On the question of the workforce, attempts are being made to broaden it through the development of school work alternation schemes, by raising the retirement age, or by attempting to reintegrate people who have left the labor market. On the last, first and last proposition, capitalist proposition, it's about the increasing of labor productivity. I think it's a very risky hope, because unless there is a technological revolution like the invention of electricity or something like that, the world growth is likely to stagnate, and some economists talk about century stagnation. In any case, the three last responses to the demographic crisis only have an impact on the consequences, but not on the causes. So to conclude, what to think about that, and what could be done? I like to make some proposals here. The first one is to break with neo-Malthusian ideologies, which are very present in the left at this stage, in France, for example, but not only. The second one is to rehabilitate the original socialist position on these issues. That is what we might call, as the Italian comrades, a politics of life. And the consequence is to recognize the social function of motherhood. That means to implement or restore family policies which are to ensure that society compensates for the cost of having a child. But if we think that the so-called demographic transition is in fact the population regime in capitalism, to save the humanity means to find a way to another mode of production. Not too long, Roger. Okay.
Roger, you're muted.
Sorry, I thought I had unmuted myself. Apologies. No, first of all, thank you very much to Raymond. Very interesting. Some of the information I found absolutely just astonishing, breathtaking. In fact, you know, the particularly the graphs, the staggering figures about the population growth and the issues around it. So look, thanks very much, comrade. It's open to any comrade who wants to make a contribution or ask a question. Matthew.
Hi, comrades. Yeah, there's lots of stuff in here, and I think that there's a bunch of questions really. I mean, all about obviously the state of society in which, I mean, obviously we live in a situation of a decaying capitalism, which is anti-human. I mean, capitalism is anti-human by its nature, but obviously a decaying capitalism is far worse. So we would expect to see some pretty adverse effects. I mean, there's, in terms of looking at the growth of population, I mean, the main thing actually, of course, in terms of the graph, the wonderful graph that the comrade showed us was the advent of sanitation and public health. You know, and that's what changes things really in terms of life expectancy. You know, go from a situation, you know, where life expectancy in the likes of London was one point was about 16, basically, because, you know, most people died as small children or babies. You know, so it's in those terms the advent of a sanitation and of other public health measures. And I think it's notable, and it should be noted, it is the effort by the Trump administration and the crazed Robert Kennedy to try and destroy public health in the US as the prime. Obviously, the US is the leader of all things in the world terms. You know, being obviously the leader of US imperialism, and that is critical. You know, the fact that they are actually trying to destroy any system of public health, whether that's vaccinations or indeed any other measures, and the destruction of science. And that's going to be critical, and that has to be fought for as well. I think the other thing is in terms of, obviously then you've then got in questions of fertility, which the comrade raises. I mean, the key question here, of course, is there's two things I think which are important. One is, of course, the right of women to control their own fertility, which of course was then you know, done by some, so, you know, in terms of the invention, particularly the birth control pill and other measures, which then allowed women to decide how many kids they had, which is extremely important. Obviously, changes everything, and therefore, you know, you see that change. The other impact of capitalism, of course, is that it's poisoning the world. I mean, I think we have to say, you know, in terms of what some of the chemistry that the capitalists are releasing into the world as their waste, you know, because obviously once they've made their money, they're not interested in keeping the place clean and just throw it away. That is actually poisoning the world, and it is actually affecting fertility rate, as people have shown, you know, scientifically shown that you know, you know, the rubbish that the capitalists throw away is actually killing off, you know, life itself, including human life. But obviously, you know, all they're interested in is money. I think the other thing, the next question, obviously, is a question of movement and immigration. I mean, obviously, we've seen in numbers of countries. I mean, say, you know, particularly say in Eastern and Central Europe, with the fall of Stalinism, of course, is people leave. You know, people leave countries in which they don't think there's a particularly good state, you know, outlook and the rest of it, and go somewhere else. And that's happened. I mean, that's changed things in many countries. You know, you're actually seen as I think Comrade said to us some months ago, talking about, I think, Bulgaria or Romania, that, you know, you're seeing a diminishing population because people just leave, obviously, because the state of places, you know, social and political, economic collapse, and that's affected numbers of countries. The final factor I would raise is the question of the state of the society. That actually, of course, capitalism, of course, does not, being an inhuman system, of course, does not like children. They cost money. And we can see this in you know, our own dear Keir Starmer, of course, is known commonly as the kid starver, because he does, you know, he of course does not want to bother with the benefit system for kids. And I mean, this is common throughout much of the capitalist world, of course, is that it's now extremely difficult to raise a child, you know, because it's extremely costly. And of course, the capitalist class does not want to spend money on the children of the proletariat. You know, and so then becomes a question of, well, does society put any value on its own replication? You know, and clearly the answer for capitalism and the oligarchs is no, it doesn't. And the question will become, well, okay, what's the socialist alternative? Thanks.
All right, thank you, Matthew. Then added some other very important points. Norma.
Perhaps better Raymond could comment or answer about Matthew, I don't know. I mean, I can contribute whatever you want.
Well,
I generally agree with all Matthew's points. So I have not a lot of comment to do. Maybe just one thing. It's about the question of freedom to choose for the women. I think we must put the issue. It's not an issue of right to choose. It's an issue of right to have the possibility to have a family if you want. For example, in France, I don't know for the I have no data for other countries, but for France, for example, the women said that they want to have 2.6 children, and we have 1.6 fertility rate. So the problem is why have we this this difference? And if we look more in the details, it's in the book, of course, but more in the details, we see that in fact the people for the working class people are the people who have less the ability to have the number of children they want. Only the 10% poorer. That means, if I can be a bit harsh, lumpen proletariat in France, and 10% less richer in France have around something around the necessary birth rate. But in the middle, especially around the people on minimum wage, you have a collapse of the number of children per family. So and if you look at other things, other sociological things like how many times the couples how long the people are in couple, you find that it's if you compare to the 80s or 90s, it's less and less each year, but it affects more the workers than the bourgeoisie, for example. So I think there is a class issue here also.
Thank you. Thank you.
Norma, do you want to come in now?
Just a few words. Thanks, Raymond. Very interesting and very actual issue. As you said, not often discussed in the working classes or in the left audience. I would like to perhaps to add that the growth, if we take the growth, as you said, taking of the natality, the life expectancy, the birth rates, and so on, no? And so the growth rate, as you mentioned very well, the evolution along the years till now, and then the projection for future. Now, if we take just now, I mean, and from the past, we see from just the same statistics you took, the growth rate is already negative in Europe. And as you said, in the that this diminish or very or much more low in the countries in the region where capitalism have a high state of evolution, and because of I mean, and because also I assume and I think in despite of the fact that the expectancy of life is high, but the growth rate is negative because of natality, that there are no more than one or two child per family set in a statistical average, I say, in a Gaussian statistical average. So while in other regions take the peak of that, of the maximum, Africa continent or Central Africa, you have that is at 23% of the growth rate. In the others, whatever, also in United States, where you have capitalism and so on, the growth rate is not too high, but it's not negative. It's more or less 5 or 6 in all the other countries, in all the other continents too. China, perhaps because already controlled, do you remember that make a control of natality and now state to completely change that. So it seems that also because of woman entrance in the work or in the fact to have as a objective a family or a high number of children is not in despite of the fact of having this economic conditions to have children in the Europe set, is not producing a growth rate of the population. On the contrary, is a decline. And if we take in Africa, where capitalism is not developed, said, and you don't have a high publics or high expectancy of life, you have a very growth rate of the population. That seems to continue. And I don't think migration will change that for Europe or for America, taking in the north, in the south, or in the Caribbean countries. So here it's true that the population population decreasing in the world in average, but not in regions, and in Europe in particularly, is because of a level of civilization, making with that the average of capitalism, social policies, family policies, and so on. Because do you remember that in France, it was an encouragement to have a child till some years ago, said, or some in which you have more more facility for women who have childs and so on. So it seems that the situation will continue like that, as at least a changement in the countries in which have capitalism at this level change as a system.
All right, thank you. Any other comrades? No other comrades have their hands up at the present time. Don't be shy to ask a question if you have one. Well, perhaps I could make a couple of points. Although I feel a little inhibited in doing that because I'm not an expert, or I've learned a huge amount from what Raymond has told us, and also from Norma and Matthew. I think, obviously this whole question of population, as has been shown very graphically, it depends on so many factors that are intrinsic to the completely warped social and economic system that we live under. And obviously, in a socialist society, then these constraints and these pressures would simply not be there. Apart from the obvious and perhaps rather crude point that in terms of the question of peace and war, we could theoretically come to a situation of zero population. And things seem to be moving in that direction rather rapidly at the present time. But even apart from that, apart from all the other factors that are building up towards catastrophic social and economic problems, it's obvious that this question of the falling birth rate, the aging population, and the shortage of labour is all going to build up to yet another doomsday scenario. But even in a socialist society, how would that work? It seems to me, I mean, this whole question of overpopulation, it simply, first of all, it wouldn't be a factor because the population would stabilise for the reasons that have been explained so well. But also, it's actually a ludicrous and meaningless word, overpopulation. Surely, it's there are, of course, geographical limits to the population a given land area can support within a given certain technology. But there are no intrinsic limits to the possible development of new technologies. A society in which each new member is seen as just an additional burden, another mouth to feed, which is a ridiculous idea. There's that many mouths to feed, and we're not looking at the muscles and brains that can be deployed in order to expand production in that to the extent that is needed. The idea in which each new member is seen as an additional burden surely is a sign of that society's degeneration and its imminent collapse. From the Paleolithic age onwards, the development of society surely is measured and is precisely defined by the new technologies it devises to overcome the previous limits. Nature itself is unstoppable. So the earthly physical and chemical forces that gave rise to life in the first place, they still persist. If comrades can understand the point I'm making, I'm probably not putting it in the clearest possible way. But they're at no risk of diminishing for billions of years ahead. Societies develop where people tap into these forces will really thrive. In other words, the population issue is yet another insurmountable doomsday problem facing society under capitalism. But it's not an issue for the development of a genuinely creative human society. Put it that way. I don't know if comrades have followed quite what I'm trying to say. I'd be interested in Raymond's comments, and yes, Norma.
No, but if Raymond have the priority to comment, so if he want to comment on that, it's just I wanted to add. So
No, no,
Well,
you
you
can.
come in now and Raymond will reply.
thank
yeah?
you. Thank you. Yes, I mean, with what you said, Roger, also I completely agree. I mean, about the human society and the forces which appeared in order to make the population. Now, I mean, in the actual conditions and what we can, in some sense, project, besides what Raymond already clearly exposed, I should say that this also I take Europe and the other regions I mentioned, which contrasted with that. I think it's also a combination of economic conditions, public health, and so public health policies, family policies, and then you have, for instance, as a consequence, the growth rate of population, and inside that we must not forget that what is called the birth rate and the expectancy life. We have the two extremes of the aging in that. From one hand, the childs, the infants, and the other hand, the more aged population. And that pose, and we see in the different regions, and in particular Europe, Raymond mentioned all the reforms of retirements and so on. We see that these two extreme ages of the populations, infancy and aged people, are perhaps the most who require the public policies and the public or the families on the protections, and are there where, for instance, in Africa, in despite of the fact that we have a growth of the population, a greater rate of births, mortality in infancy is very high. And the poverty for these infants to be nourished and so on. So, and this repeats too. If I take, for instance, my Argentina, which is also a big territory, you can go to the territories or regions in which the birth rate is the higher, the poverties of the poor conditions of infancy is critical. The power, I mean, the poverty of those childs. So I think that in the issue or in the problem, or just the facts of the populations in the world and in the different regions, we need these repeats, these conditions, these items, which we identify as general in each of the regions, of the countries, also repeat inside each territory, and is the inequality in the economic conditions, and then the inequality in the ages make that child's infancy and the more aged are the most, in some sense, of course, fragility, but perjudicated, are not protected. And we see that. We see that in all the policy, in all the in all the policies or non-policy for families or for public health, the more aged are paying, are really in difficult conditions, and the infancy, which sometimes is forgotten, the policies for infants is forgotten because, of course, childs do not vote or do not manifestate or do not cry, in the manifestation. So, and don't have voice said. So I think that in this issue, we do not forget also the problem of the extreme ages, infancy, and the more ages, which are in some sense are paying the factor, the policies, the inexistent policies are doing. Thank you.
Thanks, Norma. All right, is there anybody else? Nobody else has their hand up?
I do.
Raymond?
Yes.
Sorry, Felicity. Felicity, welcome. Yeah.
Thank you. Apologies. Thank you very much, Raymond. I've been following what you've been writing and very much welcome it. I've been listening to this in the car on the way home, so only just been able to jump on the computer. There's also the issue of austerity and how the maternal mortality in Britain and infant mortality in Britain has been severely affected by austerity. We've gone from being one of the best in the world to probably about the 20th in the world in terms of how good our outcomes are for women and babies at birth. And that's showing itself in major, I think we've so far got 10 major reports on the unnecessary baby deaths because of the impact of cuts on the NHS and on the understaffing of the maternity service. And it's one of my big campaign areas at the moment. But also, as you mentioned, probably not in the same way I'd formulate it, but you mentioned the idea that the right to choose is, not a real right to choose. The right to choose as we've got it now is that abortion is legal. It's not a right to choose in the sense of being able to afford to have a baby. And if you do have a baby, if you are a woman with 2 children in this country and you need some form of state benefit, and given the level of wages that women have, that's most women, they're not allowed to have this 3rd baby and get any more benefits as a 2-child policy that's operating, and the Labour Party is continuing to push that. The extent and the brutality of some of the experiences of some of the women does mean that there are now groups in a lot of cities campaigning on this issue for better maternity care. The idea, though, that we overpopulated and overpopulation's an issue is very strong in the environmental groups. I'm constantly arguing it with them and that it's not true. And then that comes to, I think, Comrade Norma was saying something of this, that humanity needs communities, and capitalism doesn't accept that need for communities. But it's a very strong issue with a lot of people, and when we're doing agitation, it's very important. We do street agitation to save our local women's hospital, the largest maternity hospital in the country. One of the things that I know gets people in the street to listen is when you say, tell me something that's more important than babies. Just give me something, some reason why they should be making the cuts around the needs of babies. And it gets people worked up. People get angry when they start thinking of it like that. So there's agitational issues in it. So I think that it's very useful to have this as a proper discussion about what is happening in the world and the reasons for it. But the big point I think I want to reiterate is that austerity and cuts and the actual I'm a grandmother, and I'm one of the few grandmothers I know that don't have very heavy childcare responsibilities. In the old Eastern European states, the Soviets, in the era of the Soviet Union, women were allowed to retire at 55 because the state recognized their family responsibilities at the age of 55, either looking after the elderly or looking after their grandchildren. And that has been thrown away completely. We've just not, that's not happening anymore. So women can't afford to have the babies they might want to have. There isn't proper childcare, not like there was during, even up to the 60s, there was decent childcare in Britain. And we've got, there's a whole issue there to fight for better conditions for our communities, and particularly for the role that women play in those communities. Thank you.
Thanks, Felicity. Very, very good points. Yeah, Comrade Enrico.
Yeah, sorry, I took me 20 minutes to find out where was the hand, to just say that. Anyway, what I want to say is I'm really happy and pleased that Raymond discovered the book of Debord. That what I want to say is just that Debord didn't write only that book. You can find in our newspaper nearly every month article of Debord regarding this problem. For example, in the English paper, we had two very important articles in May and April under the title of, let me see, confirmation of fertility decline. And I advise everybody there, even in the French newspaper, Internationalist, normally we publish in Debord's article. But what I would say is our party didn't find out or discover this problem in the last few years. If I go back in time, I can see that an article of Cervetto Casella in the 80s, 84, 85, where we were considering this problem that come in. The only thing that, another thing that I want to say is that the law of the population, as Marx said in the Capital, is not something definite or abstract. It's like a cycle, depend of the period and many other reasons, because the problem that I see around the world, I don't talking about today, is that to try to solve a problem that only hello?
Okay. Carry on, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, the only way to solve the problem is a communist society, because in a capitalist society will always be this problem for one reason or another. And I find that in many countries, even in Italy, it's very easy to be catch in reformism and social democracy that have nothing to do with the working class struggle. So there are situation and problem that is not easy, and there's no solution. That is the only thing I want to say. We have to be very careful because if we forget the main root, we can become, as I said, that fight a battle that doesn't solve nothing, and at the same time make the working class going in different paths that have nothing to do with the revolutionary struggle. Finish.
Yeah. Thank you, comrade. Thanks, Enrico. Are any comrades who haven't spoken? Don't be shy to just ask a question or make a small point. If not, Raymond, perhaps if you come back, and maybe that will stimulate more discussion.
Yes, I fully agree with all the interventions of the comrades, and I like very much the intervention of Felicity, because I think it was very concrete, but she raised a very important theoretical issue, is the issue of the communities. And when you said capitalism act as you want to destroy the all kind of communities, I think it's a very important very important point. And on the issue of austerity, and he echoes also Norma point in France at this stage, because the governments don't want to increase the expenses. Now the public discourse is to say we have to choose between the children and the older people, and it's a fight inside the bourgeoisie on this issue, because in France, for almost a century, we had a political consensus on the idea to try to help the families. Well, it's too long to explain here, but it was this bit from the CP, you know, to the church. You had this idea to promote and defend the material interest of the families, and all of this collapsed during the 80s. I mean, with the neoliberal order, the implementation of the new neoliberal order, and the fact that in France the fight between capital and work was replaced by a fight between so-called progressive and so-called conservative, you know. So in this sense, I am a bit more optimistic than Comrade Enrico, because at this stage, in France, social democracy is neo-Malthusian. They just begin to, you know, to think about this issue. So there is no risk of opportunism, at least in the short term. maybe later. And I think that these and I appreciate very much the I like kidding, but I appreciate very much the work of the Italian comrades on this issue, and they invite me to do two public meetings in Paris on this. We work together on this, and thank you on these issues. And the problem, it's, as I said in the beginning of my intervention, is that we are almost alone at this stage. That is the issue. And I will raise, and the problem is that capitalism is a blind system. So we need political, political intervention. I think that this issue was also a theoretical problem. It was a book on this topic in the at the beginning of in 2023. No, 20. Yes, not 23. Sorry, 2013, 2012. Or 2013, something like that, because the capitalism function as an I don't know if the translation is correct. In France, we said reproduction élargie. That means enlarged reproduction. I'm not sure. That means that the system must to expand more and more and more, and you have always to find new workers to be involved in the production, new people to buy stuffs and so. But if at a certain point the population decline, it will create a contradiction for the systems. You know, it will be more and more difficult to develop and to be broader and broader if you can find the number of new people to involve in the production. I'm not sure to be very clear in English on this issue, but it's you risk to have a kind of a major contradiction. Not today or tomorrow. I mean, but in theory, if you imagine a decline in a global decline of the population.
Okay, thanks, Raymond. Has that inspired any more comments or questions from comrades? Norma, you want to come back?
No, it's just I agree. I mean, to have in mind this point of contradiction between the system and if the global decline of population. What I try also to introduce is that this global decline is a global, I mean, in the average state, in average, but there are inequalities of that, and so, and the point is that precisely this is a combination of health, of food conditions, or economic conditions, and education, because what Raymond is saying is very important. I mean, if we project for the future in the sense that there will be regions or countries or sectors which do not have the necessary population or the necessary number of workers to satisfy their aims or objectives, whatever they be. I mean, the enterprise of the hospitals or so on. So here it appears the point of also of introducing the inequalities in this global decline of populations. Not all the regions are declining. The declining of the population is declining in the same way, are suffering the economic conditions in the same way. So I think that this point, I mean, I want to be perhaps provocative in this, is population is decline or growing? I mean, growing of population demonstrated is not an issue as it was wanted to be proposed before, I mean, years. But now is a population an issue today, or what is an issue are the systems and the condition in which these populations are living? And in another way, the issue are the condition of life, are how to escape from the inequalities. Because if you have, as I said, in this issue of population, we have infants. I mean, the worst are infancy, are the aged people, but they already lived, they already had a life, but the infancy need to have a life. And also there is the issue of education. I mean, are the populations prepared to face all what we need to live today?
Okay.
So I wanted to open, I mean, for Raymond perhaps, and for others, at least for myself. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Norma. Any more comrades want to make a comment? Don't be shy. Any questions? Any small contributions? Or if not, Raymond, do you want to make one final summing up? No, Raymond?
No, for me it's okay. I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to talk about those issues, and I'm very pleased to see that all the point of view of the different comrades converge on this issue, because I think it's a very important issue. As you said, today we face the risk of in the short term of war and world war. But I think there is two main issues in the long term. The first one, I don't choose. I just mentioned the two. Is the issue of the global warming, and the second one is the issue of population. I think it's a very important issue that we can declinate as Felicity does, even in concrete day-to-day demands, of course, and also in a general program.
Okay, well, listen, Raymond, thank you. It was a really interesting discussion, something a little different from in the topic from the kind of issues we usually discuss. It was very, very important, and I think we all learned a lot from that. Comrade, next week we have a Palestinian comrade speaking. And you get notices as usual. If there's anybody here who is not on the mailing list, please let me know your email address, and we'll make sure you get added to it. I'd like to particularly invite Raymond to come back anytime. We'd like to see him more often, and also Comrade Enrico. We'd very much welcome your participation in future meetings. I say that because they're two comrades that we don't see very often. Enrico, we're meeting for the first time. Right, comrades, if anybody has any other points to make or any announcements, this is your chance. And if not, thank you for your attendance, comrades. Do come next week, I think, to hear the Palestinian comrade and to exchange ideas with him will be something which was not to be missed. Okay.
Okay.
Bye, comrades.
Bye.
Bye.